So the big question is this: how do real estate investors who don't have a ton of free time, don't have access to off-market deals, and didn't start life on third base, how do we conservatively grow our real estate business to support our families, finally leave the corporate rat race, and build a legacy? That is the question, and this podcast will give you the answers. I'm Ed Matthews, and this is Real Estate Underground.
Greetings and salutations, Real Estate Undergrounders. It is Ed Matthews again with another really interesting guest today. Clint Harris from Nomad Capital. Thank you so much for joining us today. Had the pleasure of being on your podcast a few weeks ago. And after kind of playing the schedule game, we were able to get you on ours. So welcome to the show, and thanks for doing this.
Thanks, Ed. I'm really excited to be here. I really enjoyed that last podcast together. So excited for us to connect again.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. And hopefully the audience got a lot out of it. So, for those of us, so you and I have been kind of going back and forth for a while. So we've kind of gotten to know each other. But for those folks out there that don't know who you are, what's your story and what is Nomad Capital all about?
Yep. So I'm Clint Harris. I'm a general partner with Nomad Capital. I live in Wilmington, North Carolina with my wife and two little boys. I had a 16-year career in medical sales, selling and implanting pacemakers and defibrillators, which is kind of a young man's game. You're on call working nights and weekends. And so I always knew that eventually I wanted an off-ramp from that lifestyle. I believe that the ability to save our way to retirement has been taken away from a lot of us. And so with that in mind, I chose real estate as my avenue to try to build that off-ramp. So I got into single-family homes for a while, had 9 burrs. That's a very slow way to get ahead. I started getting into, my wife and I relocated to Wilmington in 2017, which is at the beach. And that allowed us to start buying small multifamily properties, duplexes, triplexes, quadplexes, and converting them from long-term rental properties into Airbnb properties. So we've got 14 Airbnbs that we still own that turned into a property management company. And it allowed us to create a level of financial freedom, which was great, but it was a wildly active investment strategy. So in the aggressive pursuit of something more passive, I eventually found storage, and then specifically the strategy that my partners and I use for storage, which is we're self-storage syndication with a little bit of a twist. We don't buy or build self-storage. We specifically focus on buying big box retail buildings like Kmart's, grocery stores, warehouses, and textile mills and converting them to storage.
Yeah, and I want to ask you 35 questions about all of that because I am absolutely fascinated by that. And it's interesting because, retail here in the Northeast has really taken a hit as well. And so there are a lot of box stores that just gone, including malls that are just empty. In fact, they may have leaked. So in terms of, real estate versus, obviously, you're a smart guy, you're accomplished, really you work hard given your corporate job and what you did there. You can pick any industry. So why was it real estate that drew you in?
Just historical significance, honestly, like throughout thousands of years, real estate. And, originally I thought cash flow, but the reality is that appreciation through assets mainly involving real estate has created more millionaires than anything on the planet. And the reality is for me, like money's important because it creates choice. But I think most of us believe, I certainly do, that it doesn't buy happiness. But it does create a level of freedom. And my job that I had was tied to the number of surgeries that I did and the number of pacemakers that I put in. At the end of the day, no matter what, I was trading time for money. And you've only got so many hours that you can trade for money. So ultimately, no matter what you do, maybe even it has a high ceiling, it's got a ceiling. Real estate allows you to switch to an asset class where you don't have to trade time for money, and it can give you that financial as well as time and potentially location independence.
And that's amazing. And you have 2 little guys. And how old are they, by the way?
4 and 11 months, almost a year.
Congrats. Oh, yeah. So the second one just got wheels.
We're busy, man.
Yeah.
We're busy. I'm playing zone defense.
Right. It's funny. So funny you mentioned that. I had dinner with my my college roommate, Jack, and we had this talk. Shoot, it's got to be 20 years at this point because we ended up having 2. We had 2 little girls, and now they're girls. And Jack went, Jack and his wife, Carrie, went to the third child, and she's absolutely an amazing kid, and I'm so glad she came into this world. But had that zone versus man-to-man defense conversation way back when about because the thing is that with 3 kids or more, the oldest one is savvy enough, no matter how old they are, at some point pretty early on they figure out that they have you out and the chicaneries. Right. Then it's all the fun stuff. The little one will get into something, or the big one, they'll scatter, and you can only chase 2 of them. So which one? So it's funny. But so, with regard to the move to self-storage, which I'm fascinated by, what drew you to the whole idea of taking over failed properties, retail that have gone away versus simply developing new?
Sure. So it's a numbers game, but I'll take a step back. When I was wearing myself to the bone, doing short-term rentals on the side while doing cardiology, or sales on the side, as the main gig, I was looking around. I was like, what are the three things, like the old successful guys that I look up to that have plenty of time to go fishing and travel and they have money to do it? What are they doing? And it was ultimately three things. It was hard money lending and note lending. And I didn't have the 7 figures it took to start there. It was mobile home parks, which I was already burned out on tenants because each of my units had 8 to 10 tenants per month and it was just a drag. Or it was self-storage, right? So that's what led me to self-storage. But then remember what I was doing with my Airbnb properties. I would buy a quadplex with bad long-term tenants in place that chain smoked and the place was a dump, but it was maybe a block from the beach. It was an up-and-coming small beach town. I would get the tenants out, renovate, and I would convert it to a different asset class. And when you convert it to a different asset class, it would 3.5 to 4x the gross rental potential, right? So that was ingrained on my brain, the asset class conversion and just the massive forced depreciation that could come there. So that gives you exit strategy in terms of refinance and recapitalizing. So that lesson had kind of been taught to me just through that previously. So I connected in the pursuit of self-storage of those 3 strategies. That's what I pursued. I wanted to look at. It was just through local networking groups that I met my partners, which are Eric and Levi Hemingway, a father and son team with 30 years of commercial construction projects. And they had built a self-storage from the ground up. Then they had done an expansion, and then they had done 2 warehouse conversions in town. And let's be honest, there's nothing inherently sexy about self-storage, right? You're renting someone a box of air, but when you have an asset class conversion involved, you're buying it as one thing. You change the asset, which means you're changing the formula by which the asset is valued, which gives potential for massive forced depreciation. That jumped out at me because I had done that before on a very, very small scale. So then you start looking at the numbers. We went all in as a joint venture in 2021, and we bought a Kmart building, 87,000 square feet in Reidsville, North Carolina, and we bought it for $1.5 million. Well, the replacement cost with the insurance company was $6.5 million, right? And it appraised for, I think, $1 million more than we bought it for because there's very little appetite for big box retail, right? So just getting it below the replacement cost, this is a basic real estate investing principle. You don't make money when you flip a house when you renovate it, and you don't make money when you sell it. You made your money when it smelled like dogs and cats and you bought it dirt cheap. So those are the properties that we're looking for. At one point in time, the community grew around this building. It has great residential density in a 1, 3, 5, and 7 mile radius, great visibility count, and everybody in that town knows where that building is. In fact, at one point in time, it was probably the largest employer in the town. Well, even though big box retail is dead because Amazon and Walmart have destroyed that space, at one point in time, it was still the right location for those people in that community to drive to that store to get their home goods. Even though they don't do that anymore, it still makes it a good location for those same people to sometimes take the same stuff and pay us to come put it back in the same building, right? In terms of the location, geography of where it is. And then the appetite for big box is just so low that it's basically worth what we're willing to pay for it.
Something you just said just hit me right between the eyes. They're storing the stuff that they originally bought in the exact same.
Man, people will roll back in and stuff are still in Kmart bags. And there hasn't been a Kmart in that town in 12 or 15 years. It's hilarious, isn't it?
That brings it home. Wow. Okay. So, repositioning is a classic strategy, and if you're figuring out, if you can figure out a dormant building has a highest and best use in a different asset class, you're setting yourself up to succeed more times than not. So with regard to how you are figuring out the business, right? Because I know that in self-storage, a huge piece of this is the unit mix. And
right.
So, what's the process that you and your guys go through to determine, which ones are 10 by 10s, which one, how many, of this unit and that unit? I'm not even going to mention the dimensions because I don't know. But
what you're talking about is a feasibility study, right? First of all, the feasibility study of making sure there's demand in the market, not that there's going to be, not speculative, but it's an underserved market right now. What we're seeing across the Southeast is a lot of people are getting pushed out of these larger urban markets, the Charlottes and the Greensboro and Raleigh, into these smaller secondary and tertiary markets, which traditionally are underserved for housing and especially underserved for storage. So within that mix, we'll do an in-house feasibility study, and we also use a third-party company. It's kind of the gold standard to look at everything from what's the population, is it rising or is it falling? What's the percentage of renters versus owners? What's the number of people per household, age? Make sure not everybody works for one company that could close down and shut the town down. All the things, right? Residential density in a 1, 3, 5, 7 mile radius, vehicle count. That's going to determine what the average consumer needs and what they're looking for. we get paid more for the smaller units, right? A 5x5 is going to be more expensive per square foot than a 10x30 unit. So we try to meet the demand of the market by having larger units, maybe closer to the edges or a roll-up window that a contractor could get to. But the vast majority of it is hopefully smaller units. So we use a third party and in-house feasibility study to determine what that mix is going to be. We're pretty conservative. We'll go into a market and we look at the average price per square foot for net rentable storage in that market existing, and then make sure typically all the facilities are full and there's a wait list in the markets that we move into. We'll take the average price per square foot, blend it across all those units. We'll shave 15% off of that number, and that's where we underwrite our facility. That's not where we price it. That's just where we underwrite to set ourselves up for good surprises and not bad.
Okay. And so that's when you're talking, a 15% haircut, that's for your investors. So the number makes sense at that, and you've already done all the stress testing and sensitivity analysis. Then, when you actually deliver and you're delivering at 95 to 105% of your internal projections, you're setting yourself up to succeed, right? The promised little delivery.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
A motivated seller just filled out your web form. If you call back within 5 minutes, you're nearly 4 times more likely to get that seller appointment. But delay your follow-up by even just 10 minutes? Forget it. You're toast. Ella Vista Connect calls that lead back in 60 seconds, qualifies them, and schedules your meeting. Find out how much slow follow-up is costing you. Free calculator at ellavista.com/underground.
There's always surprises. Your job is to set yourself up for good ones and not bad ones. Here's the real secret sauce of the whole deal. If you and I, Ed, we want to go build self-storage right now, we're going to spend around $110 to $120 a square foot for the construction plus the cost of the land. Our last 6 conversions that we did, which was 2 Kmart's, 3 warehouses, and a grocery store. When we are done standing at the front door with the Chamber of Commerce and we're cutting the yellow ribbon and we're opening up the doors, we are all in at $63.50 a square foot for the building, the construction, the parking lot, which we typically don't need and can outparcel, everything. So we're about half the cost of construction, not including the land. Now, the reason that is because this is what I think is a strategic advantage and something that's going to make it difficult for a lot of other people to compete, at least for a few years until they have these key components. And I'll just be honest about what they are. It's full vertical integration we have an in-house acquisition team that's finding either really good deals on the market or off-market deals. I handle investor education and capital raising. And so we're not paying retail costs for private money. We're raising money from our group of investors in our fund. We do construction in-house through my partners, Eric and Levi Hemingway, who are the founders and owners of Nomad. We build at cost plus 12%, and we have in-house property management and asset management at 5%. So the end result of all of that, the initial low purchase price and the full vertical integration, which means that at stabilization on one of our facilities, we're usually sitting at 30 to 35% loan to value. We'll buy a building for maybe $2 million. We'll put maybe $2 million into it, and it's going to appraise somewhere in the $13 to $17 million range when it's completely full, which creates some very unique exit strategies. Typically, if you're buying an apartment complex, you're going to buy it, fix it up, make it nice, increase the rents, increase the net operating income. Value's going to go up 30, 35%. And for everybody to get a nice payday, you liquidate the asset. Well, no offense to anybody's strategy, but if you have to do that to get a big payday, at the end of the day, you're trading time for money, right? And I don't care if you're wholesaling or you're a real estate agent or you're house flipping, the day you stop working is the day you stop getting paid, unless you hold it and allow it to cash flow. By landing at a really low LTV through the conversion strategy, it means we can go from 30 to 35% LTV. We can refi to 55 or 60. We don't want to stress the asset, but we'll refinance to 55 or 60%. We can pay out all of our investors with the large chunk of that coming by way of refinance, which means it's not a capital gain because we didn't sell anything. So it's non-taxable. We can pull out a couple million for Nomad, keep the lights on here, and then we keep the asset. And all the investors continue to keep their same percentage of equity. We hold the assets and we continue to roll forward. That's the idea behind the name Nomad Capital is you go where you want, when you want, and do what you want. We all want that financial independence, but in order to get it along with time and location independence, which gives you a potential for independence of purpose, you can't be trading time for money. So Our goal is to, obviously, there's some assets everybody wants to see you go full cycle, and there's some that we're going to sell. But our overall strategy is we want to use that vertical integration to land at a really low LTV, refinance, pay everybody out, but allow everybody to stay in and keep on rolling.
So how does that work so let's say, for instance, you and I are, just for mathematics simplicity, you and I are the limited partners on this, and Nomad comes in as the company, buys the asset, rehabs it, gets it to market. We're at 35%. We then go pull 30% of it out to get to, call it 5%, or no, let's say 25% to get it to 60%, right? Yeah. And, which is a nice conservative loan to value. You're returning capital. So 50-50, you and I get our $1 back each. And then we continue on. So that doesn't constitute return of capital. That's simply, obviously you have to pay attention to that as an investor, because when you ultimately sell, that becomes a taxable gain.
It could. So here's how it works. During the first year, say we're building a project out, we offer preferred return, typically for the first 2 years or so, right? So there's a back-owed pref. Let's take one building, for example. We buy a Kmart. It's going to take us a year to build it out. Hopefully 10 months, because we're working inside under a roof and we don't have to worry as much about elements. But I'm going to tell you it's going to take a year. Then after that, it's done and it's worth a lot more than we paid for it as a newly converted Class A climate-controlled self-storage facility, but it's empty, right? So now we got to fill it up. We have to hit that, for us, about 40% occupancy to become cash flow positive. Once we become cash flow positive, we build up a small interest reserve. And after that, we start distributions, and all of the capital that comes out of the building goes straight back to the investors to pay that back owed pref from the first 2 years. Once that's caught up, everybody gets quarterly distributions of cash flow equal to their percentage of equity. And then at or before year 5, let's say you put in $100,000. At year 5, you're getting back your $100,000 plus another lump sum on top, usually probably about 70 to 80 grand, something like that. Our goal is that amount plus the pref and the cash flow that you got is doing the best we can to double your money in 5 years. Our overall 10-year return is the most important thing to us in our current fund, but we want to do the best we can to get you a really strong short-term return, because we think there's a really good chance you're probably going to reinvest with us again if we do that. But you're going to get taxable income, obviously, is the preferred return and the cash flow. So we do cost seg and accelerated depreciation. And our goal is, if you're getting $30,000 worth of taxable income, we want to give you a K1 with $30,000 worth of depreciation. And then you get your return of capital plus another lump sum on top. Like, as you mentioned, that's coming by way of refinance, so it's non-taxable. For now, if we sell down the road, obviously there could be implications. But that gets to the point where we do the best we can to try to double our investors' money in 5 years or less, and then allow everyone to stay in, keep their same percentage of equity, and continue to cash flow moving forward. And obviously there's room for future cash events as well. So like within our current fund, it's a portfolio of 5 self-storage facilities across the Southeast. So at the end of the 10 years, everybody's getting another large cash event, which could happen with another refinance. Best case scenario is that we probably are picking the 3 or 4 properties that we like the best and selling 1 or maybe 2 of those to give everybody a nice cash event there as well. And then keep the rest of them and just allow them to continue to cash flow. And as that principal gets paid down, maybe 10 years down the road, when the market's right and the mortgage rates are again, we could refinance again and everybody gets another bump as well. And it just continues to cash flow. At that point, it can come to you. You can put it into trust, give it to your kids, do whatever you want. But the idea is to get away from trading time for money. We hit our 2-year goal was 100 million in assets under management. We beat that goal by just a couple of weeks. It was very tight, but we're sitting around 150 million in assets under management at stabilization right now. We have a 5-year goal of 500 million and a 10-year goal of $1 billion. And that doesn't mean that we want to buy and sell $1 billion worth of assets. We want a portfolio that's continuing to carry forward. And, we all want the life that we want. You want the financial freedom to get there, but then we want to make sure that we continue to have the freedom to fuel that so that you have the decision to make choices what's best for you and your family.
Right on. That is amazing. So I assume you have a group of investors now, and I don't necessarily need to ask any information about them, as much of that confidential as possible. But I am curious, when you were just starting out and started getting to raise capital, what were some of the strategies you used to create awareness, build that rapport and trust, and ultimately, earn the right business?
Well, I had no idea what I was doing. Well, what I did have was a sales background and worked in the white coat community. I spent 16 years doing heart surgery. So when we bought our first Kmart as a joint venture, our investors on that, there was 9 of us, and it was mostly doctors that I worked with, cardiologists, interventionalists, electrophysiologists, surgeons, and ER doctors. So it was a network. In fact, our average raise is pretty small. We're buying these buildings for so cheap that we get them for so little that the average raise is only a couple $1 million, 1.5 to 3 million. So on average, we started off as a 506B syndication, and we would have 10 to 15 investors on a deal. It was small. So we went through, a series of projects. I think by now 2 Kmarts, 5 warehouses, a couple textile warehouses, and a grocery store. But we've kind of gotten to the point of we've outgrown 506B. So we launched a fund a while back. We're about almost halfway through a $10 million fund, and we just converted our 506B fund to a 506C. So we kind of outgrew the ability to network with the community that we had, even though they're high earning individuals. Eventually, that trust transfers when you're in your circle. But as you expand out of that, kind of outgrew that. So we just converted to 506C. We're starting a marketing campaign and kind of going larger to cast a wider net, because deal flow is not a problem. There's still plenty of these larger buildings out there. And frankly, for a lot of people to try to go in and take them down, it doesn't make sense. If you're paying retail costs for the building, retail costs for the construction and the capital, you're taking on millions and millions of dollars worth of risk. And if you can't control some of that risk in terms of construction and management, it can eat you alive. So because of that, we have an advantage, at least for now. So for us, the market is telling us it's still full on acquisition mode. So we're going 506C, continuing to scale to try to hit those long-term goals.
Okay, so I want to unpack just a little bit of that. So the outgrowing of 506B to 506C, did that have to do with the 35 slots?
Yeah, that's a great question. So on an individual deal level, no. Once we converted to a fund and we knew we wanted to do that, and there's a few reasons why, like we just saved almost $150,000 in doors and panels and screws by buying it for multiple facilities at the same time, right? So you get some significant advantages of being able to do one deal or more than one deal at a time. So there's a lot of advantages there. Also a portfolio bump. It's worth more to the bank as a portfolio of properties than as an individual. So when you switch to the fund model, you're right. We have a limit as to 35 non-accredited investors as a 506B syndication. We could have gone straight to 506C, but we started with these people. Like a lot of the non-accredited investors, including employees in our company or in Eric and Levi's company, we want to bring those people with us. Like that's the whole idea of like the rich have plenty of opportunity. The people that need opportunity, the people that need to be part of a tribe of real estate nomads are the people that don't traditionally have access to that. So because of that, we started as a 506B until we got to our 35 limit threshold of non-accredited investors. Then we convert over. That no longer can accept non-accredited investors in this fund, but it allows us to do general solicitation and build up. Once we close this fund, we have to wait 60 days for a cooling off period according to the SEC. So the plan is 61 days later, we're opening up a new fund. We're taking 35 non-accredited investors. We're allowing them to get into the fund, and then we'll convert and keep on going.
Wow, that's fantastic. Okay. So now that you've got, the thing I wanted to unpack was the market. Right? So I'm curious how you are creating that. What is that marketing campaign look like?
Step one, hire people smarter than me, which is not hard to do. We have a fantastic marketing director that came on board. Her husband is actually one of our director of construction, and she came on running national marketing for large brands, vodka brands and things like that spend a lot of money on marketing. And she came on and is really pushing things with that endeavor. Obviously, a lot of social media, a lot of education involved with what we're doing. Like storage is not new. Self-storage conversions for most people is fairly new. And then the unique exit strategy that brings about is something new. So that's one of the hurdles is we've got to educate. And we're doing that through a lot of different ways. Obviously, I have a podcast. So we go on other people's podcasts. We host a local mastermind meetup. And then besides that, we're going to the conferences and rolling out, meta marketing and things like that.
Gotcha. Okay, good. And so obviously a lot of your investors from the medical, I assume, and friends of friends. So I'm sure they're friends, doctors, lawyers, business owners, whatever. And so that's how you diversify. But when you're marketing, I want to get specific to this. So are you looking at obviously the podcast? To my surprise, podcasts are a great way to raise money in a non-sales way, right? Are you also doing webinars and speaking engagements, or is that not part
Yeah, I do a decent amount of speaking, not as much as I need to be doing. We need to branch out into that because I do find that it has a significantly higher conversion rate. So to me, that's always what I want to look at, like a one-to-one conversation with someone that I already know or people that know them has the highest conversion rate. Speaking has a very high conversion rate, especially if it's in person, but typically a lower, it's a smaller group of people versus obviously a lower conversion rate if you're just, putting things out there like a webinar or a podcast, but people still get to know, like, and trust you and understand what your core values are. So when you do get a chance to connect and engage with them, there's common ground there. There's something already that they're looking for. And I honestly believe that most people are looking for the types of opportunities that you offer and that we offer and that other operators do, and just haven't always known where to look for it or where to find it. So the way I look at it is my job is not to sell our deals to anyone. My job is to educate on what our strategy is. And the first thing I want to do is ask people what their goals are. And if they don't know what they are, I don't want them to listen to what we're doing and then be like, oh, that's my goal. I'd like for them to put some thought into what it needs to look like for their life and then decide if it's a fit or not. Because the thing about our strategy is people are interviewing us and they need to know, like, and trust us. But the reality is we need to know, like, and trust them too, because we are talking about being in business together for a very long time. This is not a 3 or a 5 year deal. This is something that it has very long-term repercussions for your family and for mine. And if it's not going to work, I'd rather know about it right now. And if it doesn't line up with your goals, I'd like to be the first person to tell you that, to save your time and to save ours, because there's plenty of opportunity for you to find something that does fit with your goals. And there's plenty of capital and investors for us to find to help us get to where we want to be as well. So I think that the number one thing is connecting with people in a meaningful way and not sell the deal, explain what we're doing and educate. And the thing I love about that is that I always learn in the process, right? This is not my background originally. I worked in a lab for 16 years. So any opportunity I get to connect with anybody, even if they're not doing as much in the investing space, they're going to ask questions I haven't thought of before. That's going to force me to think about things in a different way. And that's going to bring value to me and hopefully bring value to the other people that I run into down the road. Life is about relationships, and that's where the value is.
It's interesting that you say that because we wrote a book here called The 75 Questions You Should Ask Us Before Investing. 12 questions. Somebody will ask a question and go, that's a really good question. No to that. Here's the answer. And excellent question. I'm going to steal that, put it in our book. Creating this book. It's different iterations.
Wow. That's powerful. And honestly, that's a book that's never going to stop writing itself. But that's going to keep on going.
Because, the goal is like you. The goal is to put myself in touch with people who are smarter than I possible. All right. Let's get to the final four. I've taken, you and I had kind of joked before we hit the record button that we can both go on and on and on forever, and fulfilled that promise. So let's talk about the final four. So finish this sentence for me. My purpose is?
I think that my purpose is to live a life that leaves a positive legacy on my children and an impact on the people around me, where I don't get pigeonholed as having made my decisions based upon selfishness or greed or needing money or anything else. I'd like to make my decisions in life coming from a place of love and relationships, and my purpose being to push other people to the same end, where your decisions that you make for yourself and for your family are based upon truly caring about what's best for them and not forced to make decisions, sacrificing time away from the people you love or doing things that you don't want.
Right on. That's a heck of a purpose. All right. So along those lines, we always have, guys like you and me and people that run businesses, companies like ours, we always usually have coaches and mentors. And so I'm curious about best advice you ever got.
Man, there's so many people that I owe gratitude that kind of formulated, I guess, where I am right now. And I always thought that kind of I'd reach, first it was Airbnbs and then it was storage, and that was going to be the destination. And I've just come to terms and realized that at 41, that everything is a stepping stone to what comes next. And you're a reflection of the people that you've been around, right? I am who I was 10 years ago and who I'm going to be 10 years from now, except for places I go, the people I meet, and all the information that I consume from the people around me. I think the biggest influence on me right now is my partner, Eric Hemingway, who says he's just taking these big, bold moves, conversions, and buying a Kmart and just taking swings. And he says that risk is a muscle, and it's something that it's innate in all of us that it's there, but it's painful to work that muscle. But the more you you work it, and understanding the difference in risk and calculated risk, but that risk is a muscle. And the more you work that muscle, the stronger it gets and the bigger things you're willing to take on. And the reality is like the same lessons I was learning from single families and then small multifamily and then storage. It's the same lessons. I'm just working with someone who has a stronger risk muscle than me. And it's the same thing. You just add a few more zeros. So I think that's had a big impact on me as to how far I'm willing to push myself and what I'm willing to take on to create a better life for my friends and family and the people around me is based upon how much I'm willing to stretch and work that risk muscle and put myself through some temporary discomfort when the reality is that that's just the growing pains of a broader perspective.
That's awesome. All right. How about, how you consume information? So leaders tend to be readers almost universally. Experience. And so I'm curious about two specific things. One is, how do you consume information? Physical books, audio books, podcasts, YouTube videos, whatever. And then who are you paying attention to? What authors and creators?
So growing up, I was a reader. I'm also an 11 on the extrovert scale, and I make myself busy because every time I'm around people, I get excited, and I'm the guy that goes to the Christmas party and then goes home and I'm ready to go. I'm bouncing off the walls. So I've found that as I'm out and about in my daily life now, it's hard for me to sit down and relax and read, especially with two young boys at home. So I listen to audiobooks. I do listen to podcasts. I listen to podcasts almost more as a break because they're smaller chunks that I can consume. But outside of that, I listen to audiobooks, especially. I don't have as much windshield time as I used to. I used to drive all the time when I was in the medical field, right? So I could go through books like crazy, and I did. Now it takes me a lot longer to consume information. So more and more, I'm getting little clips of things through short form video and things like that resonate or that people send to me. But if I had my choice, audiobooks is the way that I consume information. The books that have been really meaningful for me is in the development of Nomad. We all together read the book Traction, which is fantastic in terms of putting systems in place and your rocks and establishing like clearly defined goals and meetings and objectives. It creates some accountability. So from a team building standpoint, I think Traction is incredible. The book that's had the biggest impact on me, there's a lot of earlier ones. Of course, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and the Millionaire Next Door and The Richest Man in Babylon, and those that I read as a younger man that certainly influenced me. But Dan Sullivan's Who Not How book, I read that while I was building out our property management company to try to get to the point that I could walk away from managing our properties. And I did. It took 2 years to do it. And I was struggling. How do I do this? How do I do this? How do I do this? And I read that book. And the question was that's not the question. The question is, who do I know that can do this better than I can? And the idea of plugging in people that are better at their job than I am at their job had a huge impact on me building that company and then moving into a capital raising role and all the things that come along with how I organize my busy brain about the processes that we need. That book comes up in conversation with me probably twice a week. You know what? I don't know how to do this. This is a Who Not How situation by Dan Sullivan.
Right. So it's interesting you mentioned those two books, right? Gino Wickman's book and or his EOS Traction and all the books that he's written around that, and Dan Sullivan, right? Because you look at Wickman, and one of the big things I took away from that setup, that his information was, you have creators and you have integrators, right? And you need to figure out who you are as the person. For me, I'm a creator. Right? I am adequate at being an integrator, but I'm nowhere near as partners are. And so then you go through the process of Who Not How, and it's at least a two-path consideration in that, do you hire somebody or do you partner with somebody? And in some cases, in previous experiences, I've hired people, and that's worked out fine. But where I've seen really explosive growth, and it's only been in the last year and a half, 2 years that I've kind of gotten my head around it, is bringing on partners who are born operators. They're born integrators, right? I tried to talk my wife, who's a classic type A personality. She's an integrator's integrator, and, bring her into this business. And, this was like 5-6 years ago when I was going full time, and God bless her. She said, I think you and I vividly remember, I think you and I work very differently together, and I would much rather be married to you than work with you. I appreciate that. I'm going to take that advice, and I'm going to go find somebody else, because I also enjoy being married to you.
One of these two things is going to change if we keep this up.
To the marriage than I am to the business. So
I hear you. Good for you. Good man.
So last of the final four. So success means what?
I'm going to make this a little bit personal. This is something that I said a few years ago that I didn't think was ever really going to come true. When my oldest son was born, I was in the hospital and it was a rough birth, emergency C-section. Things didn't go well for wife or the baby. And the day that he was born, as soon as they both became stable, which was touch and go for a little while, I was running to the other end of the hospital. And I did 3 surgeries that day, implanting defibrillators and pacemakers. And between cases, I'm running back and forth. And everyone down there is like, dude, what are you doing here? And I'm like, there's nobody else to do it. This can't wait. That's stable. And I was going back and forth. And then the year after that, my wife is staying home and I'm running to the hospital. And I was not present in the meaningful way that I wish that I was, because heart surgery is not 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. I made the transition to full-time real estate investor in 2022 when my wife was 24 weeks pregnant. And when my second son was born, I was present in a significantly more meaningful way, and still am. I'm usually home a couple days a week, helping out with letting her go do her thing, close real estate properties or whatever. She's a real estate agent. And I said when we first found out we were pregnant, I said, if I do this right, I will be successful if my boys never remember that I sold pacemakers and defibrillators. If they don't remember that I was on call, that I was at the hospital at 6:30 in the morning, leaving the house well before they woke up, oftentimes coming home after they would have gone to bed. If I was successful in doing what I wanted to do to navigate to a life of stopping trading time for money, they would never remember that I did that. And now I'm to the point that I've got a bunch of demo devices laying around and some surgical equipment. But besides those things, they'll probably never remember. So on a personal level, that's a small level of success, because to me, it's a representation of a significant portion of their life that I'm going to be a lot more present. So that's probably the first step towards meaningful success that's really personal to me. Outside of that, I'll go back to a core belief that I honestly believe is the independence of purpose, of going where you want, when you want, and do what you want, because you're legitimately trying to make decisions that are going to be the best for you and your family. You're going to travel because it's going to create well-rounded individuals that have empathy and compassion and can see the world, the good and the bad, and have global perspective. Or, you're going to go spend your time doing this thing because a servant's heart is really important to instill in children and things like that. That's the level of success is when I get to make decisions based upon trying to create a child that's going to have a positive effect on the world long after I'm gone. And now we're talking about things that can affect their kids and their kids, right? Best case scenario between you and me, the luckiest person we know is maybe going to get 100 years in this world. So 100 years is the best anybody can hope for. And 100 years after that, for most of us, people have probably said our name for the last time. But you still have generations of people moving forward, and you can have a good life or a bad life. And that can instill characteristics in your children that have implications for multiple generations long after nobody said your name anymore. So for me, success is having the time and ability to do things that I think have eternal significance in the lives of people that I care about, that I haven't even met.
Oh man, that's perfect. And so thank you for that. I'm not even gonna try and comment. It's beautiful the way it sits. All right. So when you're not talking about real estate, I think I kind of know the answer based on your last answer, but when you're not talking about real estate, what do you do for fun?
I avoid my kids as much as possible. No, we live at the beach, and so obviously we spend family time. We go on walks. We live at the beach, and my son's name are Fisher and Finn. I am a fanatic on the ocean. I like to go offshore fishing. I like to scuba dive and spearfish. I don't do it as much as I did because it's a little bit of a risk factor, but we raise beach babies, and we live on an island. We have a boat. We do the things. We walk on the beach. We find the shark's teeth, and that's what we want to do. So yeah, we try to enjoy where we live as much as possible. And I'm having more fun than I've ever had. I love the guys I work with. I love the company, and I love what we do. I like creating things out of nothing. I have that in common with you. So I enjoy that. And besides that, I love being a part of creation and where we live.
All right. Yeah, that's a good life, man. That's a good life.
It's better than I deserve.
No, you create what you deserve. I'm going to challenge you on that.
Yeah.
So if people want to learn more about Nomad or get to know you or get in touch, what's the best way to do that?
The easiest way to do that is you can email me directly. I'm clint@nomadcapital.us. I talk to investors and operators all day, every day, and I love it. And that's something that I always learn, and hopefully I can help other people learn as well. So connect with me directly there, or you can go to nomadcapital.us and schedule a call, or you can find me on Facebook or LinkedIn.
Fantastic. Clint Harris, thank you so much for joining us. Again, my friend, it's good to see you, and I'm really glad we had this conversation, so thank you.
Same, Ed. Thanks, man. I appreciate the time.
This has been the Real Estate Underground. Don't forget to subscribe. It helps us grow. Until next time, Undergrounders, remember your real estate journey begins with a simple step. forward. Now get to it. Bye for now.